We would have to fast forward until June 7th of 1996 to get Oscar's most significant fight in a young and bright career against an all-time great of the sport, Julio César Chavez. Along the way, Oscar had conquered 2 divisions, devastating every opponent he had faced. But questions remained to be answered according to the talking heads and pundits. It was not enough to decimate every opponent he had faced. They wanted to see Oscar's chin and will be tested. Many argued that the Golden Boy was soft. The good looks, the great smile gave an appearance of a movie star more than a fighter. The Golden Boy thought that the best way to show he was tough was to fight the man who was the embodiment of tough. Perfect math by the Golden Boy. Well done. Now, at this time, Chavez was a nutshell of his former self, at best. I'm just being honest, based on how Chavez performed in his prime. But even an aging Chavez was a dangerous fighter. After all, Chavez is an unordinary fighter among unordinary fighters. Chavez, by the time he met Oscar in the ring, had already defended his various titles in 3 different weight classes 27 different times successfully. He also held and still holds the record for the most title fight victories and most wins against fighters in title fights, standing at 31 for both. But wait, there's more. Chavez also holds the most title fights at 37, with 21 of those successful defenses won by knockout. Oh, and I should also mention that Chavez never had been stopped and also only lost once and had 1 draw, losing to Frankie Randall and coming to a draw with Pernell Whitaker. 2 undeniable talents to ever box. I mean, Pernell arguably was as talented, if not more talented, than Floyd boxing. But hey, that's just my opinion. All of this with a record of 96, 1-1. Chavez stepped in to fight Oscar as an aging lion. On fight night, Oscar showed up to earn the respect of his community. But the fight had created a divide within the Mexican and Mexican American community. Oscar was the Mexican American who at the time was not embraced by Mexican fans for being too much of a pretty boy. He was also everything a Mexican fan did not want in a fighter. Oscar was true to the cardinal rule of boxing of hit and don't get hit. Meanwhile, Chavez had superb technique but always was willing to take 2 for 1. Many fetishized Chavez as some sort of grandiose slugger, but in reality he was a master technician with otherworldly conditioning. Oscar had previously sparred with Chavez when he was much younger, so fighting Chavez was less intimidating than usual. The fight would be defined by a cut over Chavez's eye that opened in the first round. Ultimately, it would create big problems for the legend's vision, and the young lion capitalized on the moment. But like many of us when young, the Golden Boy had miscalculated his boxing math. Instead of being embraced by the Mexican community, Oscar had become a public enemy number 1. If he was disliked before the fight, after beating Chavez, it was no understatement to say he was hated. Lots was left to be desired to fans around the world. Oscar had now won the fight that was largely determined by a cut. Now, from here on out, I will focus on fights that will help tell the story that I want to tell of Oscar's boxing career. And by that I mean I have to skip over a lot of details of Oscar's life and career. For the sake of time and length, I have to skip certain events or fights to avoid making a 3-hour documentary. And I think that's without controversies and without including his promotional career. For example, before he fought Chavez, Oscar had beaten Jeff Mayweather, Jorge Paez, and John Molina. Now, not the biggest names, but when we move along his career, I will gloss over certain guys, not because they're less important, but because of time. Oscar and Chavez will not meet again until 4 years later. By this time, Chavez was more clearly on his way out of the sport, more so than the first fight. Meanwhile, Oscar had won fights over Hall of Fame fighters like Hector El Macho Camacho and Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker. Oscar would again defeat the aging legend again in 8 rounds. Only this time, he decided to stay in front of Chavez and fight. But it was clear to everyone watching that Oscar would not be forgiven by many Mexican fans for what he did to their national hero. And the other thing that was obvious was that Oscar was the new face of boxing. Anytime the Golden Boy fought, the stars appeared.